The film begins with an Old Christians Club rugby team from Uruguay boards an aircraft on October 13, 1972, to travel to Chile for a unique game. This is really thrilling because the majority of them have never left the country, and some family members join them for support. The plane trembles a few times as they get closer to the Andes Mountains, which divide Argentina and Chile. According to a passenger, there is a small amount of turbulence caused by the suction effect created when the warm winds from Argentina combine with the cold air from the mountains. But as it continues, the turbulence increases, and the plane abruptly falls a few miles. While everyone clings tight and watches their belongings tumble into the corridor, the pilots force the jet to continue flying through the violent gusts. They glimpse the light for a brief moment as the plane descends once more and strikes the mountain, splitting it in two. The plane's tail blows off one of the players, but the front continues until it crashes into the snow, causing all the seats to collide and killing several individuals in a variety of gory ways. The survivors attempt, one by one, to get over their astonishment and get up from their seats in order to assist the other passengers who are stuck. Two medical students attempt to calm down the people with shattered limbs despite the blood all over the place. A few men visit the pilot, but he passes away in barely a few words, and the radio stops functioning. Some cry out for assistance, but in vain. The survivors gather inside the plane, covering any gaps with their bodies and luggage as the temperature drops quickly, especially at night. Many of them are so overcome with terror or sobbing that they do all in their power to console one another. They learn that a couple more folks had passed away frozen in the morning. They glance around, seeing nothing but snow and mountains for kilometers since the storm has passed and the sun is shining brightly. In order to live, the gang determines they have to start working. To make space for everyone to sleep at night, they remove the seats and debris from the aircraft. After that, they transport the injured survivors to the area with the greatest sunshine so that their care may be given priority. All of the bags and luggage are meticulously inspected for food, and whatever they uncover that could be beneficial is stored inside for safety. With the hopes that they can carry the bodies with them when aid arrives, they relocate the dead away from the plane and keep them close together while covering them with snow to prevent them from decaying. In addition to the one person who flew away, they already had 11 dead on the first day. They have a small snack after getting everything organized, already being cautious to limit their meal to last. They attempt screaming and flailing their arms as they hear a jet go by, but they are nowhere to be seen. They are prepared to spend their second night in the plane. They will block the opening with the luggage and use the garments from their bags as blankets. Finally, on the third day, Nando wakes up. Since they crashed, he has remained unconscious, so they need to explain what transpired. Even though his body is in poor shape, he drags it across the floor to be with his sister, who is also not doing well. Nando thinks about his father by himself back in Uruguay when they had to tell him their mother passed away when he inquires about her. They then begin melting snow for water by using some metal. In the hopes of being seen, they also create a massive X on the ground with their bags. They continue shouting when another jet goes by, trying to get the light to reflect off the mirrors. The plane's wings rocking is seen by someone, which might indicate that they were spotted. They hear the plane again the next day, but it's far away, so they must be looking in a new place because they didn't find them. As they begin to talk about survival strategies, the gang remembers that the tail had some batteries, therefore they should go look for it. The survivors begin climbing the mountain to locate the tail after making homemade goggles out of mirrors and the leather from the seats. Once they ascend a few kilometers, they find that the amount of snow prevents visibility of the collision location from a distance. This implies that there is very little probability that a rescue plane will locate them. The four guys decide to head back to the crash site for the time being when they notice snow starting to fall. They begin to run out of food after a week of days going by. They sample some moss from a rock because there are no animals or vegetation around, but it tastes really awful. And disagreement over whether or not they should take flesh from the deceased passengers quickly breaks out when Nando says he'll eat bodies if necessary. They can't agree on anything. Some survivors say their poop is black, while others say they're afraid of going to jail for it. They eventually become so hungry that they begin eating whatever they can find, even cigarettes and shoelaces, as time goes on. Their urine only becomes darker as a result of this. After Nando's sister dies on the 8th day, Coco chooses to write a letter to his parents in which she describes the place's beauty as well as its grief. They are battered by a couple more storms in the days that follow, but they are able to escape by sheltering inside the plane. On day 21, though, the group's half grows weary of the circumstances and declares that they allow the others to consume their corpses should they pass away. Then, going outdoors, they remove the flesh from the corpses using a piece of glass so they may eat for themselves once more. When they realize this, a few decide to alter their minds and go outside with the others to eventually feed as well, leaving only 5 individuals who choose not to turn into cannibals. The next day, they set up a suitable method to conceal the majority of the bodies as they work, making it less graphic and preventing others who aren't cutting from having to watch it. In order to warm up the meat, they also begin to leave certain chunks outside in the sun. After a while, they discover a brand new suitcase buried in the snow, and to their delight, inside is a radio. They succeed in turning it on after constructing a crude antenna, but discover later that the government has chosen to stop searching for them after 66 search missions. 4 individuals succumb in and devour human flesh while the entire group collapses, having lost all hope. 3 guys then make the decision to walk outside and search for the plane tail properly this time. The first thing they discover is a large amount of debris along with 5 bodies, one of which is that of the man who was ripped out of the plane during the descent. They continue to go as quickly as they can, which is challenging because there is a lot of slippage while ascending and the air is extremely cold, making breathing difficult. They seek shelter against the mountainside at night, trying to fall asleep despite the violent storm all around them. When they awaken, they are coated in snow but alive. Since 2 of them are critically ill and 1 is blind, they slide backward on a piece of rubble. The final man consents to consume human flesh after such a horrific ordeal and sobs himself to sleep. The gang has been battling a storm for 5 days as of day 17. They attempt to maintain the atmosphere by telling stories while stuck inside the aircraft, but all of a sudden an avalanche descends, burying the craft and covering it in snow. One of the few who were able to remain calm heads outdoors, where he discovers the storm has intensified. Then, in a frantic attempt to free every passenger who was buried, they begin excavating in the snow, even peeing on it to hasten its melting. They manage to free everyone after a great deal of labor, yelling, and effort, with the exception of a woman who was so deeply buried that she passed quite rapidly. They discover another avalanche approaching at that very time, which buries them once again and kills a few more men, including the team captain. They also hear an odd voice. The survivors instantly dig a few holes for themselves to breathe, but as they wait, all they can do is pray while listening to the sounds of the snow falling. They push 8 people up against a corner once they regain some vigor. They had been buried for 2 days on day 18, and the hunger is becoming excruciating. They are forced to begin harvesting flesh from the corpses, but this time it will be much more difficult because they are unable to cover the majority of the dead with snow to conceal their faces. It implies that they are well aware of who they are consuming. Numa becomes enraged at this and begins to smash windows with his shovel, fracturing his leg on the glass in the process. However, this doesn't deter him. Instead, he simply keeps digging. He eventually succeeds in creating a large enough hole in the snow for the surviving survivors to emerge on day 20. The party takes a minute to regroup and be grateful for their survival before starting to excavate the wreckage. Despite realizing that he has a gash on his foot that he has been ignoring due to the cold, Numa continues to assist. They eventually manage to pull the plane out thanks to the bright days, and they even think about sending a few men out on another hunt, but they are still unable to endure the bitterly cold nights spent outside. They ultimately decide to hold off a few more days because summer will soon be here. Finally, on day 34, the thaw starts. The 2 injured guys from earlier are in critical condition, and the medical students are aware that there is nothing more that can be done. Within a few hours, they find that Coco has fluid in his lungs. Despite CPR, he is unable to breathe and will soon pass away. They discover his letter after they remove the body and save it. Day 36, with the weather becoming better, Roberto, Nando, Tintin, and Numa set off on a new hunt, packing more layers of clothes to withstand the cold. Numa soon begins to feel lightheaded and stumbles. Upon examining his foot, they find an infection. Numa tells them he's strong enough to walk back alone and begs them to continue, even though the gang feels they should take him back. Numa faints as soon as he gets back to the crash scene. When he wakes up a few hours later, he finds that the other ill passenger is dying while having hallucinations. The team begins working on clearing the ice from the cockpit first thing the next morning. 2. Just in case they require it. Numa feels helpless and upset since he wants to assist but is unable to do so due to his weakness. The group soon returns with exciting news: they have located the plane's tail. They bring a lot of clean jackets, bottles of rum, cigarettes, and even chocolate after making a few quick journeys with the others. In an attempt to get the radio to function, they also discover the plane's batteries and attempt to connect them to the cockpit. They labor very hard and eventually manage to get some static going, but they never get a response. Days begin to pass once more, and despite having extra jackets, the gang is reluctant to venture outside after nearly dying after one night spent in the outdoors. The virus that Numa has is growing worse and affecting other parts of his body. They must begin decomposing the bones into flesh as the sustenance they discovered in the tail is still insufficient. They no longer find it bothersome because it has become normal by this point. Numa ceases eating in order to give the others more since he knows he won't have much longer. They quit up after making another attempt to repair the radio when one of the cables causes a little short circuit. They scrawl a message on the aircraft, counting the survivors, in their rage. The party is shocked to see some waterproof cloth covering the pipes on another journey to the tail. Without delay, they get it and begin assembling a sleeping bag to ensure their survival during the nights spent outside. The tiny radio continues to function, and they learn from the news that the Air Force intends to send another plane to look for them even though it has been 58 days since the accident. A fight breaks out about what to do next. Some believe they should wait for the plane, while others argue that because they never see them down here, they should go for assistance. Roberto rips off the sleeping bag out of frustration. After that, the gang finds a camera and uses it to capture a lot of images while diverting their attention by making bird noises as they watch the birds pass past. Numa allows them to consume his corpse that night, and when they wake up the next morning, they discover he has passed away. There's no greater love than to give one's life for friends is written on a note that is in his hands. These remarks give Roberto, Nando, and Tintin the idea to go out once more. They begin their ascent westward with the intention of conquering the mountain to reach Chile after receiving the new sleeping bag and a large quantity of beef. They dig a hole in the snow and cuddle up inside the sleeping bag since the weather turns particularly windy at night, enabling them to live until dawn. At last, they arrive at the summit of a somewhat tall mountain. When they learn there are still a significant number of kilometers to travel, they are distraught. They briefly ponder abandoning up because they won't have enough food for the journey, but Tintin offers to return so that Roberto and Nando would have enough food. After a protracted and challenging journey, the two eventually descend to the valley, where the terrain is more rocky than snowy. Roberto just wraps some cloth around Nando's broken shoe and they continue. After supper one evening, Roberto ends up puking, but Nando consoles him, and the next morning, they are back on the road. They ultimately discover a river with fresh water and even a little lizard, so all of their hard work pays off. They glance up at that time, and to their surprise, they see a man standing astride a horse, gazing at them. When he sees them screaming and waving their arms, he tosses some paper and a pencil at them since he is on the other side of the river and the sound of the water is making it difficult for him to hear them clearly. After the pair introduces themselves, the man puts the paper back and starts making phone calls. The air rescue service receives the communication shortly after, and a fresh operation is organized. Roberto and Nando are finally able to eat real meals when the stranger returns and brings them to his cabin. After a few hours, reporters from all over the place are encircling the area and aren't afraid to pose embarrassing questions. The party at the accident site is thrilled to hear that help is on the way and begins getting ready for the rescue. They pack their belongings into bags and begin cleaning up, even saving fragments of the jet as a keepsake. Roberto and Nando accompany the helicopters when they eventually arrive so they may serve as guides. When the gang is eventually saved on day 71, they weep with joy as soon as they spot the helicopters. Even though there isn't enough place for the group's suitcases, they insist on bringing them, and the entire rescue is captured on camera. There are 16 survivors in all. Their family are waiting for them to return when they arrive in the city. They are then brought to the hospital, where they will be hailed as heroes by a sizable audience. Given that they see that the reporters' bodies are skeleton, the physicians keep them outside while doing extensive testing to assess their health. They assist one another with showering because they are hardly able to move, and their families take care of their personal grooming after that. Although each survivor is given a bed, they cuddle up to sleep together that night since they're still recovering from the aftershock. And the story ends. Subscribe for more videos like this. Turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.